not a word to use lightly or carelessly. It's a word that, if misused, can cause unreasonable fear. COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
In just over 7 weeks, it spread to 120 countries. There are over 120,000 cases, more than 4,600 are dead, and over 67,000 have now recovered. The financial markets took another brutal gut punch as fear deepened. The Canadian government announced $1 billion aid package as cases of coronavirus rise across this country and now surpass 100. Late tonight, the Trump administration banned all travel from Europe for a month. And another stunning headline: the NBA has just suspended this season until further notice. We have extensive coverage on all of this, beginning in Canada with CTV's John Benavali-Rao.
A huge mining conference held at this Toronto Convention Centre is now the focus of a massive public health investigation after an Ontario man later tested positive for COVID-19.
It's extremely likely that the individual acquired it at this conference where there were thousands of people from across the world.
In Sudbury, the building the man works at has been temporarily closed. It's located at Laurentian University, which has become the first university in Canada to cancel all campus classes until further notice, moving them to online delivery.
I think it's just better because we don't know the extent of how bad it could be.
Among those at the conference last week, the Prime Minister.
J'ai pas eu de test.
He said he has not taken a test and is following the advice of Canada's Chief Public Health Officer. This as New Brunswick recorded its first presumptive case.
This case is a woman between the ages of 50 and 60 years old. The patient traveled internationally from France.
In Alberta, the province has recorded more cases, all travel related. Officials there are now asking those over 65 to not travel outside Canada, and that those who've left the country should limit attendance at large public gatherings when they return.
Alberta is now asking all travelers returning from Italy to self-isolate for 14 days.
In Montreal, passengers getting off of Air Canada's final flight from Rome were surprised they weren't checked.
I was sure they were going to check us as soon as we got off, but they just gave us a papers showing us the symptoms and everything, and that was it.
At CFB Trenton, one of the Canadians under quarantine has also tested positive. The person was among those on the Grand Princess cruise ship who were flown to the base earlier this week. The others are now worried.
Are we going to get it is obviously the big personal concern.
The health minister was asked how many Canadians could get infected.
It's safe to assume that it could be between 30% of the population that acquire COVID-19 and 70% of the population.
Concerned, Ottawa-based Shopify and the global giant Google are asking their staff to work from home. Shopify says it wants to play a part in reducing the spread of the virus and lessen the potentially huge burden on the healthcare system. Lisa.
All right, John, we'll be talking to healthcare workers shortly, but first, the U.S. late tonight announced its own exceptional measures to fight this. Across America, there are now at least 37 deaths and more than 1,200 cases, now including Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Wilson. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Melvin.
For a president who has publicly downplayed the crisis tonight, he took extraordinary action.
We will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. These restrictions will also not apply to the United Kingdom.
Hoping to keep new cases offshore, Donald Trump called the outbreak a foreign virus, promising economic relief to businesses.
The virus will not have a chance against us. No nation is more prepared.
But America's top coronavirus doctor warned,
bottom line, it's going to get worse.
Donald Trump, who's often compared COVID-19 to the common flu, contradicted again.
The flu has a mortality of 0.1%. This has a mortality of 10 times that.
On the West Coast, an outbreak in Seattle forced Washington state to close schools and ban all large gatherings of 250 people, or else.
The penalties are you might be killing your granddad if you don't do it. And I'm serious about this.
On the East Coast, the National Guard deployed to New Rochelle, a New York suburb with the largest cluster of cases. Everyone there now under quarantine.
People who come to the front door, they're wearing masks. They're afraid.
He literally is driving away.
From panic to prayers, Dozens of churches in and near the nation's capital suspending services. Reverend Timothy Cole, who tested positive, is recovering in hospital, but hundreds of his parishioners under self-quarantine.
For me, the scary part is having any type of contact with anyone. I'm going to assume we don't have the virus, but I don't want to do anything that could potentially spread the virus.
With these sweeping new efforts to contain the outbreak and recommendations to avoid large crowds tonight, the president canceled all his upcoming campaign rallies. Lisa?
All right, join Melbourne in Washington tonight. The Canadian government announced its plan to help navigate these unpredictable times. Here's Ottawa Bureau Chief Joyce Napier with details.
Only hours before the World Health Organization declared a pandemic, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced Canada's $1 billion plan to combat the spread of COVID-19.
I know that people across the country are worried about their health, worried about their aging parents, worried about the kind of impact this virus could have on their job, on their business.
Ottawa will set aside $500 million to support provinces and territories for critical healthcare system needs. It will invest $275 million in research, another $150 million for public health response, including funding for Indigenous services, and $50 million for an advertising campaign on COVID-19.
You need to sort of prevent this rapid rise in cases that will really impact our health system.
And for those staying home because they're sick, Ottawa will make employment insurance benefits available immediately.
The intent behind DEI is to allow people to stay in their homes and isolate at home if that's the advice of public health.
But for some provinces, Ottawa's response today is far too mild.
If the virus spreads at a level beyond what we are currently estimating, the cost will be significantly higher than that.
And if that cost does increase, expect more money in the upcoming federal budget.
I'm pleased to announce that on March 30th at 4 p.m., we will be presenting Budget 2020.
The finance minister says there will be more relief for businesses and for those sectors impacted by COVID-19 and the plunging price of oil. That means that the contingency fund in this budget, the so-called rainy day fund, Lisa, will be much heftier than in previous years. All right, Joyce. Now, rainy day is one way to describe the stock market today. Disaster is another. The TSX fell by 688 points, and the Dow Jones lost over 1,400. Both are down more than 20% from their highs last month.